Learner Pathways, Data Collection and Reporting, or DCaR, overview of 3 steps for mass uploading of a CSV file. Once you're at the DCaR homepage for the Learner Pathways system, you may begin to upload courses, programs, and transfer agreements and decisions files using the modules located here. Note that it's recommended to do so in that order: courses, programs, and then agreements, as the agreements data is reliant on data within the course and program files. Also note that these 3 modules operate in exactly the same capacity, thus the functionality of the process would be identical. With that in mind, we'll illustrate using the Courses module, again remembering that it would be an identical process for the Programs and Agreements modules. Once you're ready to begin, you would click on the module, in this case Courses, and then go ahead and select Submissions in order to be able to select a file from your system. Once here in the system, you'll see the 3 main steps for importing data, then for validating that data and correcting your errors as step 2, and then step 3 of publishing the data. We're going to start with step 1 and importing that data, noting that it will use the CSV file formats for data standard and the templates in order to enter that data into the system. And you can find these located at the ACAT website on the Learner Pathways page, located here, for the blank templates and file formats for the CSV files for the DCaR system for the Learner Pathways system. You also find an overall data dictionary for the system, an overview of the entire LPS, the Learner Pathways system, a DCaR manual, should that be also helpful, and soon a catalog manual will also be present there. Back in the DCaR system, using the CSV file format data standard and the template, in this case for courses, we would then have already completed our file at our institution, and we would now be ready to import that data. And once we select import in this first step, we can now see that we can import new data, which is what we'll do here by selecting a file to upload, or we could import data from the catalog that we wish to do a mass edit for back in our system. Here, I'll select a file to upload and select that file, and then I'll select import file to bring it into the system. It'll ask me to confirm it. I'll check my title. I believe that's accurate, and I will confirm. And now the data will go into the system, completing my first step of importing data into the system. My second step is to now validate that data. I will click on Validate, and as I see here, I have all the rules for the system and the data standard. I'll run those validations, and it will now show me the progress on the right-hand side and the percentage total here as it runs through the different rules. Note that while I uploaded a small number of records just to illustrate the particular system, it's also quite efficient whether you upload hundreds or even thousands of records at one time. Once 100% complete, I will click Close, and my data will appear in the system for a list of all the records that I have placed in that file. Note that if there are many records, hundreds or thousands, it will show me them grouped, and I can go ahead and click through them. The next step is to show the view, in this case for validation errors, to see if my records have any errors present within them. Once at this view, I can see the different validation rules from my data standard that were run against the records I uploaded, which ones errored out as marked here in this column, which ones did not error out as marked here below with just the word information, showing me that there were no errors. And you can see underneath the number of records, 0 records errored out, so that's why they're just for information for these particular rules. And it shows me how many records did error out for these rules related to where it states error. If I wish to do so, I could sort these further by using the feature that's at the top of these columns, and that's present in all of the views, whether it be for course records view, the published results view, or the validation errors view that we're in at the moment. You can click on the sort feature. It has quite a few features present within it, whether it's equal, not equal to, etc. You can put the actual number in there. You can add an additional value, and then you can select filter in order to filter just the aspects that you want. This is especially helpful if you have hundreds or thousands of records in the system and you want to narrow the search of which ones you want to work on at one time. Once you're done with that filter, you can clear it from that particular column. Now, in this case, if we were to look at how do we see what particular records are listed here, I can collect the filter by rule, as you see on the left-hand side. I can click on that. And I'm just choosing to do so in the same order. I didn't resort them, as I was just shown you could do if you wish to do so. After clicking on the filter by rule, I will see the results for this particular rule. In this case, effective end date being an invalid length, I can scroll over and I can see, this is where my file format error exists. See, these are correct for the start date, year, month, and day. However, these have become flipped in my course file that I uploaded to day, month, and then year. That format will error out as it doesn't match the required file format for CSV dates. Note that this can commonly happen in your system as you move files back and forth, as your system will have an automatic default for what its formatting is desired as. You may wish, when you're doing your CSV file formats, to lock the format as the correct day, month, year format with the dashes, not with slashes, in order to make sure that they don't error out for something as simple as the formatting aspect that's listed here. When correcting something as simple as the formatting error, it's possible you might wish to do so directly in the system, as this isn't a substantive data issue where you're actually missing data or having correct data. It's simply a formatting issue, which you could do by clicking the pencil here, if I show an example, and simply flipping that format with the correct dashes, and then clicking Save. And that record would now be removed from the error because we fixed it for that particular rule. You may also see that since these have the exact same structure, you might then wish to also do, since again it's only formatting, a bulk update. And then I would be doing them all at the same time, remembering that that's the format and the data that I wanted. Got to get that correctly. And then click Save. It confirms that I want to do that. And then I save that, and now all of those records, because of the format error that I've just corrected, were removed from this field rule error. I can click on the red X to remove that filter, and then I can go back in and look at my other validation errors. And I can continue to go down the list of other items present. You notice this item didn't come out of the list yet, even though I corrected it, because I haven't revalidated the data yet. Every time I make a change, I want to ensure that I revalidate that data to ensure that accuracy is happening in my records. I would simply, in order to do that at this point, click on Validate again, run validations. Once it's 100% complete, close that. And I would now see that that was been removed from my list of errors because I've corrected those particular records. Note that if you're working on a large number of files, you may wish to correct a number of errors and revalidate at different items all at the same time. We just wanted to illustrate the particular step that every time you make a change, you need to revalidate the data and run the validation to see if there are any errors. Big picture, it's also important to note that you can continue to go down the list, look at your filter rules, and see what items are present there for all the different errors that are listed. And in this case, we see a delete record, for example, which is a mandatory field, is blank. All mandatory fields need to have data in them, things such as delete record, which identifies almost always a no answer. There's two options in the data standard, yes or no, and it must be filled in. And almost 100% of the time, you'll have an answer of no in the data field, because for that, you would only put yes if you are actually having a record in the system you want to completely remove because you put it in by accident. Now, again, illustrating these items, this is a fairly substantive data piece. You're actually missing data from your system. And similarly, if I just close this filter and go back to the list, these items, such as institution course ID, another mandatory field, missing a credit value or an invalid field for the credit value, missing a code for a course number, a course title. These are actually data items that are missing from your system and or from the CSV file, the master file you uploaded. It's always recommended as a best practice to change your original file and then re-upload it by importing it again and revalidating the file. Definitely best practice because you want your institution system to be the source of truth and then to re-upload into this system again for sharing in the catalog and then outward to students via Transfer Alberta and the search tool. With this particular aspect in mind, we would highlight that if I look back at your original file, illustrated by this file in this case, we would see a number of things. One, if we hadn't changed that file format for the date, we could change it here by right-clicking and clicking Format Cells, clicking Custom, and picking a change for the particular date format underneath that custom here. Note that if you've accidentally locked that field, depending on the choice you pick below by your default or by accident, you might underneath Protection see that it says locked. If that's the case, you might be finding yourself a little bit crazy because underneath number, it's not allowing you to change the order or the format that you need. Just check the protection and make sure the field isn't locked. Then under again, selecting custom underneath the number, I can now take this and go year for the year first, then a dash, not a slash, MM for month, another dash, DD for day, and then I can click OK. And now you'll see in my file I've fixed that date format. So if I didn't do that manually within the system as I'd illustrated a moment ago, I can do it here in my data file because I have other errors as well. As we mentioned here, we want to make sure, unless there's any errors in my records, that I would insert no, can't have that file blank. I could continue on to make the other edits. There's those institution codes that were blank, the course code and the course number, the course title. I see 3 to 6 is a range here. I have to have a single number. I can't have multiples, so it'd either be 3 or 6. If I wanted more than one, I'd create a second record. One would be 3, one would be 6. I can't have NA as a credit value or as any of the fields in this case that are mandatory when a number is required. Thus, I would make sure to change that NA to an actual credit value number. This illustrates some of the common items that you might see happening in your particular CSV file. Once I've made those particular corrections, always make sure to save your master file. And then I would go through and I would re-import that data using that functionality. I won't do so here, but this again would illustrate that. I'd re-upload that file, and then I would revalidate that file. And then it would review for me again the show view of my validation errors, and hopefully all of my errors then will have been removed and everything would look like this just for information section and see all zeros, and then I'm ready to publish everything. Now, if you wanted to move forward with just the things you've already edited, and if you've got too many records that you don't want to edit for errors at this time, you could go ahead and publish the data as step 3 and come back and edit the errors later. Before you do so, if you wanted a copy of all of your data first that you put in the system this time, collect course records, and then you could select the export function here, as you see below. It shows all 19 will be exported. I can click on export, so that shows me again a copy of my entire file, and then it would demonstrate below it's successfully exported. I would close. I'll find that down in the bottom left-hand corner. I can open that file, And there would be a copy of everything that I just placed in the system. You'll notice that that looks a lot like your master file that we were just working with. I'm going to close this, such as this file below, although we've made some edits just related to our recent discussion. If you just wanted to export only the errors you have remaining and not your entire file that you put in the system because you already have a saved copy of that file from your import, then what we would do at this time is we'd move forward and we can publish the records that have no errors by hitting Publish Data. It shows me there's 10 records I can go ahead and publish. I'll click on Publish those records. It'll show me that my information has been sent to ACAT, and after that validation and approval, which we'll demonstrate in a moment, you'll get that data into the catalog and then eventually into the Transfer Alberta search tool once ACAT has clicked Approve, just for formatting, etc. You will also be sent a confirmation message on how your request will be processed. I'm going to click Close now that I know my publication has been complete, and I'll just note that related to this confirmation message item, that I would illustrate that will show you what happens in the catalog in a moment when your institution information is accessed, as shown here in the catalog settings for your institution, by looking at the contact person email, again illustrating how important this particular message is because all of your notifications from the catalog, from DCaR, are sent to whoever's listed under this particular email in the catalog. Back in the DCaR system, you can notice how you can view by clicking on the arrow all of your published records, and a listing would be present here. If you had a number of records, you could go ahead and go through all of the different sections of them. At this point, if you wanted an export of just your errors, again, because you've already published the records that are completed, you could click on Export. You notice now it only shows 9 courses being applied because those are the ones remaining. I can click Export. It'll show me it was successful. I can click Close. Back down again in the left-hand corner. I can open that file. And now instead of my full file, what do I see? I see all the records that have errors in them that I need to go and correct. And I have that institution course ID information, the course code and number, title, etc., the missing delete records, all those items that I pointed out that we needed to go and correct. And now I have a copy of my errors that I could go correct in my system and then re-upload that file. That illustrates the overall process of importing data, validating data and correcting errors, publishing data that's already ready to be published into the catalog, and if need be, going back into the system and continuing to work on my validation errors as needed. In the system, under my various views, you'll note that you also have information that tracks the history of the different users and the things that you've been doing in the system. You can also add notes if there's more than one of you from your institution doing some work, if you wanted to provide some information to each other. Further, that just to re-illustrate, after you've completed all of these steps, that information gets published to the catalog as we've discussed, and you would see it in the main dashboard for offerings requiring approval. And then once ACAT approves that for, again, formatting, etc., it would show up in the Transfer Alberta search tool underneath the transfer agreements and decisions data. This highlights the overall process or journey, if you will, that your DCaR data takes as it works its way through the different aspects in the system, from import to validate to publish to the catalog and then to the Transfer Alberta search tool.